The war had been over for 6 days when Private First Class Yara Os found the enemy soldier dying in the kitchen of an abandoned farmhouse and made him breakfast anyway. She had not gone looking for him. She had gone looking for the farmhouse because her unit had pushed 12 kilometers past the ceasefire line chasing a false signal. The transport that was supposed to retrieve them had developed a fuel coupling failure that the motor pool estimated at 4 to 6 hours, and it was raining in the specific aggressive way of Drev Secundus in the wet season, which was less like rain and more like the sky expressing a personal grievance. The farmhouse was shelter. Oh, she had taken shelter. He was in the kitchen because the kitchen had the only intact roof section, and because he had been crawling for approximately 3 hours before he got there, which was apparent from the trail, from the state of him, and from the angle at which he had finally stopped moving and simply put his back against the wall and accepted whatever was going to happen next. He was Veth Resurgence. She knew this from the uniform remnants of the gray and copper insignia pattern that had been the identifier throughout the 18-month campaign. He was also, by any reasonable assessment, in the process of dying. The wound in his left flank was old enough to be infected. He was running a fever that she could feel from a meter away, and he had the particular stillness of someone whose body had exhausted its arguments and was waiting for the conversation to end. His eyes were open. He was watching her with the full Veth inner lid retraction that she had learned to read over 18 months as the expression of someone who has decided to see clearly whatever is about to happen to them. She stood in the kitchen doorway for approximately 4 seconds. Then she said, "I'm going to look at that wound. Don't move fast." He did not move at all. She crossed the kitchen and knelt beside him and opened her field kit, which had, by the grace of a resupply 3 days before the ceasefire, a full complement of medical supplies including 2 broad-spectrum antibiotic compounds that were cross-compatible with Veth physiology. She had checked the cross-compatibility chart 6 weeks ago for reasons that seemed academic at the time. She worked, he watched her. She had field first aid certification and enough practical experience from 18 months of active deployment that the certification had become the least important part of her competence. She cleaned the wound. It was deep, a fragment wound that had not been treated properly in the field and had been making bad decisions ever since. And she packed it, and she administered the antibiotic compound, and she taped the dressing. She did not ask him why he was there. She did not ask him whether there were others. She did not ask him anything because the questions could wait and the infection could not, and because she had long ago decided that the person in front of her was always the first priority and the context was second. When she was done, she sat back on her heels and looked at him. He was still watching her with the full-open gaze. His color was still wrong, the silver gray of Veth skin showing the dull, mottled quality of fever, but he was breathing more steadily than he had been. "My name is Yara," she said. "What's yours?" A long pause. She did not think he was deciding whether to tell her. She thought he was deciding whether telling her was a thing that was still possible, whether he was still a person who had a name that mattered, given everything. "Kale Vorov the Resurgence Third," he said. His standard was formal, precise, the kind learned from a manual rather than from use. "Kale," she said. "Okay." She looked around the kitchen. There was a camp stove on the counter, Veth military issue, she thought, which meant he had come with some equipment, and there were supply containers stacked against the far wall. Her own pack had emergency rations, and because she had developed specific opinions about field nutrition over 18 months, a small supplemental kit that her mother called overkill and she called professional standards. "I'm going to make something hot," she said. "Oh, you should eat it." He looked at her. "The ceasefire," he said slowly. "6 days ago," she said. "Yeah. You are human coalitions." "Private First Class Yara Osai," she said. 43rd Coalition Ground Forces, currently without transport, currently in your kitchen." "Oh, this is not my kitchen." "Nobody's kitchen," she said. "I'm making breakfast in it anyway." She stood up and went to the counter and examined the camp stove. It was functional. She lit it with the lighter she kept in her left jacket pocket and began going through her supplemental kit. Oh, you should leave me, he said. She did not look up from the kit. Probably, she said. I am resurgence. I noticed. As the war is over, she said, 6 days, she found. What she was looking for, a sealed pouch of grain base, the good kind with the dried vegetables already incorporated, not the kind that tasted like someone had described food to a person who had never eaten it. She filled the pot from her water supply. The antibiotic is going to take about 4 hours to start making real progress on the fever. You're going to feel worse before you feel better. Eating something now will help. A silence. Why, he said. She put the pot on the stove. She turned to look at him. He was still against the wall, watching her with those open eyes, and what was in them now was not fear and not hostility, but something more confusing to him than either of those. She thought something he did not have a category for. "Oh, because you're sick and I have food," she said. "That's why." He looked at her for a long moment. On Veth, he said carefully, an enemy who renders aid in the field is understood to be creating an obligation of intelligence. Information exchange, it is a manipulation technique. She looked at him steadily. I'm not going to ask you for information. Then what do you want? For you to eat something and not die of a preventable infection, she said. She turned back to the stove. That's the whole agenda. The rain continued its grievance against the roof. The pot began to heat. She found a second container in her kit, a small one, the kind her mother had pressed into her hands at the deployment departure with the specific expression of a person who does not trust military nutritional standards, and she added a portion of its contents to the pot, which changed the smell from adequate to something that qualified as food in a more genuine sense. What is that? He said. Spice mix, she said. My mother makes it. I don't actually know everything that's in it. She's never fully disclosed. Another silence. Then, with the careful quality of someone testing unfamiliar ground, it smells like something. Yeah, she said, it smells like food. That's the idea. She cooked, he watched. The kitchen filled with the smell of the spice mix and the grain base and the dried vegetables reconstituting themselves into something warm and present, and the rain kept coming down, and the stove made its small, reliable heat. She thought about the 18 months. She thought about the specific shape of what she had done in them, not the fighting exactly, though there had been that, but the other things, the things that accumulated in a long campaign like sediment, the people she had carried, the decisions made in short windows. The way she had learned to assess a situation in 4 seconds and act in the next 4, not because she was fearless, but because she had found that action and fear could coexist if you didn't wait for one to finish before you started the other. She had not expected the ceasefire to feel the way it felt. She had expected relief. What she had gotten was something more complicated, a sudden removal of the structure that had organized every day for a year and a half, replaced by a silence that did not know what shape it wanted to be yet. 6 days of that silence, and she was still not sure what came next. She thought that the soldier against the wall probably knew less about what came next than she did. She served the food into 2 portions, her own tin mug and the Veth Camp cup she found in the supply stack, which was the right size and the right design and suggested he had more supplies than she had initially assessed. She brought his portion across the kitchen and set it within his reach. Close enough to take, not so close that taking it required effort from someone who did not currently have effort to spare. You need to sit up a little more to eat, she said. I'll help. She helped him adjust his position against the wall. He was heavier than he looked, Veth muscle density being what it was, and the movement cost him visibly, but he managed it with the controlled determination of someone who had been managing things at cost for some time. She put the cup in his hands. He looked at it, he looked at her, he looked at the cup again. Eat it while it's hot, she said, and sat down against the opposite wall with her own mug and began eating. He ate, she ate, the rain came down. After a few minutes, he said, this is not standard coalition field ration. No, she said. The additional ingredients. My mother's, she said, I told you. It is, he paused in the way of someone locating the right word. It is not what I expected field food to be. My mother would be pleased to hear that, she said. She has opinions about field food. He was quiet for a while, eating with the careful attention of someone whose body is insisting on this even when the mind is not sure it should be happening. She watched him without watching him, the peripheral attention she had developed for patients, for people who needed monitoring without the pressure of being monitored. Although resurgence communications, he said finally, indicated that coalition soldiers had been instructed to process prisoners without due consideration. She absorbed this. She knew what it meant, knew the specific propaganda it was built from, the distortions that had circulated on both sides to harden soldiers against their opponent's humanity. She had heard the coalition version of the same kind of story about the resurgence. What do you think, she said, about the communications? He looked at the cup in his hands. I think, he said slowly, that I am eating food made with a dead woman's spice recipe while a coalition soldier watches to make sure my fever doesn't spike. My mother's not dead, Yara said. She lives in a craw. He stopped. I apologize, I assumed. She mails me the spice mix every 2 months, Yara said. The mail is extremely reliable, more reliable than the transport apparently. She said the last part with a dry edge that was mostly directed at the motor pool and its fuel coupling optimism. Something happened on his face. A small, controlled movement that she thought was the Veth approximation of a person almost laughing against their own intentions. The transport, he said, it has failed. 4 to 6 hours, she said, optimistically. On Veth, he said, we have an expression. The optimist and the transport share the same relationship to the arrival time. She looked at him. That's very relatable across species lines. Perhaps it is, he said, and the movement on his face completed itself into something that was, she was fairly certain, a genuine expression of amusement. She thought, there it is. There's the person under the uniform remnants and the fever and the 18 months of a war that neither of them had designed. They ate the rest of the food in a silence that had changed quality. She noted this without making anything of it. The rain continued. The stove kept its heat. Outside, the sky was doing something complicated with the light that suggested the wet season might, eventually, relent. His fever was worse by the second hour, as she had told him it would be. She monitored it. She had a portable thermal reader in her kit, another item that her unit's medic had taught her to carry because you never knew, and she watched the numbers climb to the point she had expected, and then hold there and then in the third hour begin the slow retreat that meant the antibiotic was doing what it was supposed to do. He was not comfortable during the second hour. He did not complain. She had seen this in Veth patients before, the particular cultural reflex against expressing physical difficulty, the holding of composure as a point of dignity. She did not push against it. She kept the thermal reader running and she kept herself in the kitchen and she refilled his water when it needed refilling, which was often because fever took what it took. At some point in the second hour, she found the camp stove's secondary function, a heating element for the supply containers, which turned out to contain several items of Veth field ration that were, by her assessment, nutritionally adequate and texturally challenging. She examined them with the interest she had always brought to unfamiliar food. What is this one? She said, holding up a container. He looked at it from the wall. Kelvrath, he said, it is a pause. It is grain-based, dried, you add water and it becomes a paste. It is not considered a pleasant food. Or is it supposed to be? Field rations are not generally optimized for pleasure, he said. Mine aren't either, she said, except for the spice mix. She looked at the container. Can I try? He looked at her with an expression she couldn't fully read. You want to prepare Veth field ration. I'm curious, she said, and we've got time. He talked her through the preparation, the water ratio, the temperature, the specific way you were supposed to stir it that she thought had more to do with tradition than chemistry, but which she followed anyway. Because when someone tells you how to make their food, you make it the way they tell you. The result was, as advertised, paste-like and texturally interesting in a way that required some commitment. Oh, she tried it. Oh, it needs something, she said. Yes, he agreed. It always needs something. The Resurgence commissary ran out of the supplemental flavoring approximately 4 months ago. We have been eating it without. She looked at the container of her mother's spice mix. She looked at the Kelvrath paste. She looked at him. Well, she added the spice mix. The expression on his face when he tried the modified version was something she thought she would remember for a long time. The specific sequence of a person encountering something completely unexpected in the middle of a situation where the unexpected had, for a very long time, exclusively meant something bad. That is, he said slowly, significantly different. Oh, better. A pause. Oh, yes, he said, better. She made a second portion. She ate it herself. It was, she thought, genuinely interesting. The Veth grain base had a quality that the Coalition grain base didn't, something earthier, and with the spice mix it became something she might have chosen to eat rather than eaten because it was what was available. What is in the spice mix, he said, specifically? I told you, she said, undisclosed family recipe. Your mother guards it. She's mentioned leaving it to me in her will, Yara said, which is her way of saying she's not telling anyone while she's living. This time the almost laughter completed more fully, a short, soft sound that was not quite human and was quite genuine. My grandmother, he said, had a spice she grew herself for the Kelvrath. We called it her particular contribution to making the unbearable bearable. He stopped. She died in the second year of the campaign. The rain on the roof, the stove heat, the pause between sentences. I'm sorry, Yara said. He was quiet for a moment. She was old, he said. It was not the war that took her, but she did not live to see the end of it, and I think she would have wanted to. A pause. She was the one who believed the Resurgence cause was correct. Among my family, she was the one who argued for it. I joined because she convinced me. Yara said nothing. She waited. I am no longer certain, he said slowly, that she was right. The words sat in the kitchen with the rain and the stove and the cooling paste, and the spice mix that two grandmothers had contributed to in their ways. Oh, she said, what changed your mind? Many things, he said. Over 18 months, the things I saw done, the things I was asked to do. He paused. And 6 days ago, the ceasefire that the High Command said would never come because the coalition would never agree to any terms that acknowledged Resurgence standing. The ceasefire acknowledges our standing. Oh yeah, she said, it does. My grandmother believed we would die for that acknowledgement, and it would come too late for the dying to have meant anything. She was wrong on both counts. He was quiet. I have been trying to determine what to do with that for 6 days. She thought about the shape of that, 6 days in an abandoned farmhouse with an infected wound, and the end of the thing you had organized your existence around for a year and a half, and the understanding that the grandmother who had sent you into it had been both right and wrong, and was not here to discuss either. I know a little about not knowing what to do with something, she said. Well, he looked at her. The ceasefire, she said, 6 days of it, I don't know what comes next either. I've been a coalition soldier for 4 years and I don't know how to be anything else right now. She turned the spice container in her hands. My mother keeps telling me I'll figure it out. She's probably right, she usually is. About the spice mix, he said. About most things, she said. The spice mix is just the most documented example. The almost laughter again, more complete this time. She found herself smiling at the sound of it, which surprised her in a way that also didn't surprise her, because she had spent 18 months learning to find the human thing in people, the Veth thing, the Drev thing, the whatever species was in front of her thing, and it was not a skill that turned off when the tactical situation changed. In the fourth hour, his fever broke. She saw it happen, the color beginning to correct, the quality of his stillness shifting from the rigid stillness of someone managing pain to something more relaxed. She took the thermal reading and showed it to him. The antibiotic has cleared the worst of it, she said. You're going to need to keep the wound clean and you're going to need more antibiotic tomorrow. Do you have a medical contact with the resurgence? Since the ceasefire there should be. There is a medical processing point, he said, at the Veth transition station, 14 kilometers. Can you walk 14 kilometers? He considered this with the honesty of someone who had stopped performing optimism. Tomorrow, he said, possibly. Okay, she said, today you rest and drink water and let the antibiotic work. Tomorrow we assess. He looked at her. She had said it without thinking about it. She thought about it now, 14 kilometers. She had no transport for at least 2 more hours, and after that she had to return to her unit and file the incident report and begin the process of figuring out what a coalition soldier did in a post-ceasefire world. She had a clear and reasonable set of things to do that did not include accompanying a resurgent soldier 14 kilometers to a Veth transition station. I can get you to the transit road before my transport arrives, she said. If you're mobile enough, from the transit road you can flag a resurgence supply vehicle. The transit road is 4 kilometers, he said. 4 kilometers is manageable before the transport, she said, if we start soon and take it slowly. He was quiet for a long time. You would walk 4 kilometers in the wet season rain to put me on a road where someone else can take me the remaining 10. Yes, she said, that's what I'd do. Why, he said, not hostile, not suspicious. Just genuinely asking with the same quality of genuine question that he had been asking since she first said she would make breakfast. As if each time she did a thing he could not categorize, he needed to understand it not for tactical reasons, but because he was trying to build a framework and kept finding the framework inadequate. She thought about how to answer it in a way that was true and useful. You asked me that before, she said, with the food. Oh, yes. And I told you because you needed it and I could do it. Yes, he said, the same reason applies here. Oh, yes, she said. That is a very simple framework, he said. It works, she said. Most complicated frameworks are just simple frameworks that forgot what they were for. He was quiet for a moment. My grandmother would have liked that, he said. Mine would too, she said. She liked things that cut straight. She began repacking her kit. The field dressings, the thermal reader, the antibiotic supply. She pulled a second compound from the kit and set it beside him with the application instructions written on a piece of paper from her notebook. Because she did not know what medical resources the transition station would have, and preparation was not pessimism. The instructions, she said, apply the second compound tomorrow morning if you can't get to the station. It's a different formulation, broader coverage. Don't mix them, one or the other. He looked at the compound and the instructions. He looked at her. You are giving me medical supplies. You're going to need them if you can't reach the station tomorrow, she said, and I have them. These are coalition medical stores, which I am authorized to deploy in a medical situation, she said, which this is. Another long pause, specialist OSI. Private first class, she said, not specialist yet, working on it. Private first class OSI, he said, with a precision that suggested he was using the full designation deliberately as a form of acknowledgement. I want to tell you something. She waited. In the resurgence, he said slowly, we were told that coalition soldiers had been systematically dehumanized in their training, that they had been conditioned to see Veth life as an acceptable cost of engagement, That asking for mercy from a coalition soldier in the field was functionally the same as asking for none. He paused. I believed this. I had reasons to believe it, things I had seen in the early campaign that seemed to confirm it. Oh, she said nothing. I have been revising this belief, he said, since approximately the time you said the phrase whole agenda. He looked at the medical supplies in his hands. I think the propagandists on both sides did their jobs with some skill. Yeah, she said quietly, they did. He stopped. I want to say I am sorry for what the resurgence did, but I am not certain I have the standing to say it, and I am not certain sorry is the word that fits, and I am not certain anything I say in a kitchen 14 kilometers from my own people means anything beyond this kitchen. It means something in this kitchen, she said. I think that's enough for right now. He looked at her. The inner lids were fully retracted. She had learned in 18 months that this expression meant the Veth equivalent of seeing something clearly and choosing to go on seeing it. Oh yes, he said, I think it is. She helped him to his feet. It took some effort and some patience and some adjustment of the pack weight to accommodate the wound position. And by the time they were both upright and provisioned and had pulled their respective rain gear against the wet season sky, they looked, she thought, like two soldiers at the end of a very long thing, which was exactly what they were. They walked the 4 kilometers slowly, which was the right pace for his condition, and also, she found, the right pace for the terrain. The wet season had done interesting things to the ground, and fast walking would have been a series of bad decisions. He walked with the controlled steadiness of someone for whom pain was currently a feature rather than a crisis, which was a mode she recognized and respected. They did not talk much while they walked. What talking happened was practical ground conditions, footing, the specific distribution of weight when the slope changed. But it was easy talking, the comfortable shorthand of two people who have already had the real conversation and are now just navigating the logistics of the conclusion. At the transit road, they stopped. The road was empty in both directions, which was Risa. Nable for the wet season and the early hour. She checked his wound dressing, which had held through the walk. She checked his temperature with the reader, which was continuing its retreat toward normal. The second compound, she said, tomorrow morning if you need it, don't wait past midday. I will reach the station before midday, he said. Good, she said, but if you don't. Tomorrow morning, he said, I understand. She adjusted the dressing tape at the corner where the rain had found an edge. This one's going to need redressing tonight, she said. The station will have proper supplies. Oh yes, he said. She finished the adjustment and stepped back. They stood on the transit road with the rain coming down and the 4 kilometers behind them and the 10 kilometers ahead of him, and the entire complicated aftermath of 18 months in every direction. On the spice mix, he said. Oh, she looked at him. You still have some, he said, in the container. Oh, yes. The resurgence commissary, he said. They will need to rebuild their supply arrangements under the ceasefire terms. The supplemental flavoring for the Kelvrath will be part of that. He paused, with the careful precision of someone constructing a sentence whose full meaning he wants to be exact. If your mother is willing to share the composition of the mix, not the formula, I understand it is not disclosed, but the general family of ingredients, so that our commissary could identify a Veth-sourced equivalent. I'll ask her, Yara said. He looked at her. She'll probably want to know why, Yara said. I'll tell her it's for the Kelvrath. She'll have opinions about Kelvrath, but she'll tell me what she thinks is in it. The resurgence commissary would be in her debt, he said. She doesn't operate on debt, Yara said. She operates on whether the food will be better. She'll say yes because the food will be better. Something moved on his face, the full sequence this time, nothing controlled back. She thought it was gratitude, though the Veth expression for it was different from the human one. It had a quality of weight to it, of something received after a long time without receiving. Private First Class Yara Osai, he said, formal, full designation again, of the Coalition 43rd Ground Forces. When the transition arrangements are established, when there are channels between the resurgence and the coalition that function the way channels are supposed to function, I would like to know that you are well. She thought about channels that function the way they were supposed to. She thought about how long that might take and how many things would need to be built before it was possible. She thought about a transition station 10 kilometers up a wet season road and a motor pool transport that was 4 to 6 hours from arrival and her own unit's next assignment, which was not yet determined. Kaelvor of the Resurgence Third, she said, his full designation back to him. When the channels work, yes, I'd like that too. A sound came from the north, a vehicle, distant but approaching, the specific engine signature of a resurgent supply transport. He heard it at the same moment she did. That will be the morning supply rotation, he said. They come through at this hour. Good timing, she said. Oh, yes, he said, good timing. The transport came around the far bend of the road and slowed at the sight of two figures in the rain. She saw the window lower, saw the assessment happening inside, saw the moment the driver identified the resurgence insignia on what remained of his uniform. The transport stopped. Go, she said. He went. At the transport door he paused and looked back at her, the full open gaze, inner lids retracted. The Veth expression she had learned to read as seeing clearly and choosing to go on seeing. He said something in Veth. She did not have the language. I'll need a translation, she said. He thought for a moment. It is the formal acknowledgement used when you leave someone who has, he paused. Who has made you less alone in a difficult time? The closest standard approximation is, I carry this with me. She held that. I carry it too, she said. He got in the transport. It moved north. She stood in the rain on the transit road and watched until it was small and then not visible, and then she turned south and walked back toward the farmhouse and the motor pool transport that was, optimistically, somewhere between 2 and 4 hours from arriving. She thought about the ceasefire and the silence it had made and the thing that came next that she did not yet know the shape of. She thought about her mother, who would have opinions about Kelvrath and would tell her what was in the spice mix anyway because the food would be better. She thought about a grandmother who had grown her own spice for an unbearable food and called it her contribution to making it bearable. She thought people keep trying to make things better. With what they have, that is the whole story. That is what all of it is. She thought this was probably enough to build a next thing on. The rain let up slightly, the way the wet season occasionally did, not stopping, not promising anything, just pausing long enough to remind you that pauses were possible. She walked in the pause and she thought about what came next, and she found that the shape of it was becoming, slowly, more visible than it had been 6 days ago, which was not nothing. Her transport comm crackled. Estimated arrival 90 minutes barring further coupling issues. She called back, copy that. She walked. In her jacket pocket, in the small sealed container, there was still a portion of her mother's spice mix, enough for 2 more portions, maybe 3 if she was careful. She had enough to make something for the motor pool crew when they arrived if they wanted it. They probably would. 90 minutes in the wet season gave you a particular relationship with anything warm. She walked and thought about channels that would eventually function the way channels were supposed to function, and about a Veth commissary that needed to make unbearable food bearable, and about her mother in Accra who was very probably right about most things. She thought I carry it too. She kept walking. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story sat with you, the morning in the kitchen, the 2 grandmothers who never met, the formal acknowledgement between 2 soldiers at a wet season transit road, the spice mix that held all of it together, then you know what this channel is. It is about people who try to make things better with what they have. That is the whole story. That is what all of it is. Subscribe if you haven't yet and leave us a comment below. Tell us the moment that got you. We read them all. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.